The emergency room at Mercy General Hospital in Cedar Springs, North Carolina, was unusually quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Sarah Mitchell stood at the nurse's station, reviewing patient charts with the kind of focused calm that came from 15 years of emergency nursing. At 42, she carried herself with a quiet confidence that put patients at ease, though few knew the source of that steadiness ran deeper than medical training. The automatic doors burst open with a rush of cold February air. Two young Marines in dress uniforms half carried, half dragged a third man between them. The injured Marine was older, maybe in his late 50s, with silver hair cut high and tight. His face was pale and twisted in pain, one hand clutched to his chest. "We need help," the younger Marine on the left shouted. "Commander Patterson collapsed at the ceremony. We think it's his heart." Sarah moved immediately, years of training kicking in. She grabbed a wheelchair and rolled it toward them. "Bring him here. Let's get him sitting down." The commander's eyes opened briefly, unfocused with pain. When he saw Sarah approaching, something shifted in his expression. His jaw tightened. "No," he said through gritted teeth. "Get me a real doctor." Sarah stopped, the wheelchair still between them. She'd heard variations of this before, but it never stopped stinging. The two young Marines looked uncertain, glancing between their commander and the nurse. "Sir, I'm a registered emergency nurse with 15 years of experience," Sarah said calmly. "We need to get you examined right away. Chest pain is serious." I said no. Commander Patterson's voice was stronger now despite his obvious pain. "I don't need some civilian woman fussing over me. Where's the doctor?" One of the young Marines, a corporal with kind eyes, looked embarrassed. "Sir, please, you need help." "I need a doctor, Corporal, a male doctor, someone who knows what they're doing." The commander's face was turning an unhealthy shade of red now, whether from pain or anger, Sarah couldn't tell. Dr. Chen appeared from behind the curtain of another bay, alerted by the commotion. "What's going on here?" "This Marine is experiencing chest pain and shortness of breath," Sarah said, her voice professional and even. "He needs immediate evaluation." Dr. Chen, a slight man in his 30s, moved forward. Somehow, when he reached for the commander, there was no resistance. Patterson allowed himself to be helped into the wheelchair, his breathing labored. "Let's get him to Bay 3, Dr. Chen said. "Sarah, I need you to." "She's not touching me," Patterson interrupted. "Anyone but her." Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. Dr. Chen's expression flickered with anger on her behalf, but she gave him a small shake of her head. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. "Jackie, can you assist Dr. Chen?" Sarah called to another nurse across the station. As they wheeled Commander Patterson away, Sarah heard him mutter something about political correctness and standards dropping. The two young Marines who'd brought him in lingered at the nurse's station, both looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry about that, ma'am," the corporal said quietly. "The commander, he's old school." Sarah offered a tight smile. "It's fine, I hope you'll be okay." The other Marine, a lance corporal with a deep southern accent, shook his head. "It ain't fine, ma'am, that was disrespectful." He paused, then added, "We're supposed to wait here while they check him out. He's being honored at the Veterans Memorial tonight. 35 years of service." "That's impressive," Sarah said, meaning it despite everything. She understood dedication to service, even if the commander didn't know that. She returned to her charts, trying to focus, but her hands were shaking slightly. After all these years, after everything she'd been through, it still got to her. The assumption that she was less capable, less worthy of respect, simply because of how she looked. 20 minutes later, Jackie emerged from Bay 3. She walked directly to Sarah, her expression troubled. "He's stable," Jackie said quietly. "Looks like severe angina, not a full heart attack. Dr. Chen wants to admit him for observation and more tests." She paused. "Sarah, he's been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About you. Where you went to school, how long you've been here, whether you're actually qualified. Jackie's voice dripped with disgust. Dr. Chen shut it down, told him your credentials were none of his concern, and that you were one of the best nurses he'd ever worked with. Sarah felt a warm flush of gratitude toward Dr. Chen, but also a deep weariness. Thanks for letting me know. There's more. Jackie lowered her voice further. He's refusing to let you be involved in his care at all. He specifically requested that if you're on shift, you're not to come near him. Dr. Chen is. Well, he's pretty angry about it. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Chen himself appeared, his normally calm demeanor visibly strained. Sarah, my office, please. In the small, cluttered office, Dr. Chen closed the door and turned to her. I'm not going to honor his request. David, it's okay. It's not okay. Dr. Chen's hands were clenched. This is discrimination, plain and simple. You're a valued member of this team, and I won't have patients dictating who provides their care based on prejudice. Sarah sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. I appreciate that, I really do, but we both know that forcing the issue will just make everything harder. For him, for me, for everyone. So we just let him win. We let him get the care he needs. Sarah met Dr. Chen's eyes. I've dealt with worse than a stubborn Marine commander. I can handle this. Dr. Chen studied her for a long moment. You shouldn't have to handle this. No one should, he sighed. But you're right. I'll have Jackie and Tom cover his care for now. Sarah returned to the ER floor, trying to shake off the encounter. The afternoon shifted into evening, and she busied herself with other patients. A child with a broken arm, an elderly woman with pneumonia, a construction worker with a nasty cut that needed stitches. Each person she helped with the same care and competence, each one grateful for her skilled hands and kind words. Around 7 o'clock, one of the young Marines who'd brought in Commander Patterson appeared at the nurse's station again. It was the corporal with the kind eyes. Excuse me, ma'am, he said. Nurse Mitchell. Sarah looked up. Yes. I just wanted to apologize again, for earlier, for how the commander treated you. He shifted his weight uncomfortably. I know it's not my place, but it wasn't right. What's your name, Corporal? Diaz, ma'am, Marcus Diaz. Well, Corporal Diaz, I appreciate your words. How is Commander Patterson doing? They're keeping him overnight. He's angry about it, but they say he needs to stay. Diaz hesitated. He's still saying things about you, about how the military is better than civilian medicine, how Marines take care of their own. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. The military is very good at taking care of its people, she said quietly. Were you in? Diaz asked suddenly. You have that, I don't know, that bearing like you've served. Sarah was about to answer when Jackie called her name urgently. Sarah, ambulance coming in 2 minutes out. Major trauma, car accident. The conversation with Diaz was forgotten as Sarah shifted into emergency mode. The next hour was a blur of blood, broken bones, and the delicate dance of saving a life. The accident victim was a teenage girl, and by the time they stabilized her and sent her up to surgery, Sarah's scrubs were stained and she was exhausted. She was washing her hands in the staff bathroom when she heard raised voices from the hallway. Stepping out, she saw Commander Patterson standing near the nurse's station in a hospital gown and robe, one hand on an IV pole, arguing with Jackie. I don't care what the doctor said. I'm checking myself out. I have a ceremony to attend. Sir, you have unstable angina. Leaving now could kill you. Jackie was using her stern voice, the one that usually convinced even the most stubborn patients. I've survived firefights in 2 wars. I think I can survive a ceremony honoring my service. Patterson's face was flushed again, and Sarah could see the slight tremor in his hands. Dr. Chen appeared, his voice sharp. Commander Patterson, you need to get back to your room, now. I'm a free man. I'm signing out AMA. Against medical advice. the dreaded words that released the hospital from liability but often led to tragedy. Sarah found herself moving forward before she could think better of it. "Commander Patterson." He turned, his expression hardening when he saw her. "I told you to stay away from me." "I know what you told me." Sarah kept her voice level. "But I'm not going to stand here and watch you kill yourself out of stubbornness. You have unstable angina. That means your heart isn't getting enough oxygen. If you leave now, you could have a major heart attack before you reach that ceremony. Is your pride worth dying for?" "You don't know anything about pride," Patterson said coldly. "You don't know what it means to serve, to sacrifice." "Sir," the voice came from behind him. Corporal Diaz had returned and was standing in the hallway with the other Marine. "Sir, maybe you should listen to her." Patterson spun around, grimacing with pain from the sudden movement. "Stand down, Corporal." "Respectfully, sir, no." Diaz stood straighter. "These people are trying to help you. That nurse is trying to help you, and you're being unfair." The hallway fell silent. Sarah could see the conflict playing across Patterson's face. Anger, pain, surprise at being challenged by a junior Marine. "I don't need help from someone who's never worn the uniform," Patterson said finally, but his voice had lost some of its edge. He looked directly at Sarah. "You can't possibly understand." Sarah felt something break loose inside her, a wall she'd built carefully over years suddenly crumbling. She was tired of being dismissed, tired of biting her tongue, tired of hiding parts of herself to make others comfortable. "You're right," she said quietly. "I can't understand what it's like to be you, but maybe you can't understand what it's like to be me either." She reached down and pulled up the left sleeve of her scrub top, pushing it high above her elbow. On her upper arm, faded but still clear, was a tattoo. The eagle, globe, and anchor of the United States Marine Corps, with the number 311 beneath it, the designation for a rifleman. Below that, in smaller script, were the words, "Helmand Province 2010. Commander Patterson's face went completely white. The IV pole shook in his grip. "8 years, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. 3 deployments. I left as a sergeant. And before you ask, yes, I saw combat. Yes, I know what it means to serve. And yes, I know what it means to be judged and found wanting by people who don't know me." The silence in the hallway was absolute. Even the usual hospital sounds seemed muted, distant. Patterson's mouth opened, closed. His hand went to his chest again, not in pain this time, but in what looked like shock. The lance corporal who'd come with Diaz was staring at Sarah with wide eyes. "You," Patterson's voice was barely a whisper, "you were in Helmand. For 7 months of my second deployment. Longest 7 months of my life." Patterson swayed slightly. Dr. Chen moved forward concerned, but the commander waved him off. His eyes never left Sarah's face, and she saw something changing in them. The hard certainty cracking, something like shame beginning to seep through. Patterson's voice was hoarse, "I need to sit down." Sarah and Dr. Chen helped him into a wheelchair, and this time, the commander didn't protest her touch. As they moved him back toward his room, Sarah caught a glimpse of Corporal Diaz. The young Marine snapped to attention and gave her a crisp salute. She nodded at him, a lump forming in her throat, and kept walking. The night shift was long and quiet after Commander Patterson returned to his room. Sarah found herself replaying the scene in the hallway over and over, the look on the commander's face when he saw her tattoo. She'd spent so many years keeping that part of her life separate from her nursing career, not because she was ashamed, but because she'd learned that people made assumptions. Men assumed she'd had an easy time of it, been protected, given special treatment. They assumed she couldn't have really been in combat, couldn't have really experienced the things she had. It was easier sometimes to just be Sarah the nurse rather than Sergeant Mitchell, USMC. Around 2 in the morning, Jackie found her in the break room. "He wants to see you." Sarah looked up from her cold coffee. Who do you think?" "Commander Patterson. He's been asking for you for the last hour, but I told him you were busy with patients." "Was I?" "No, but I figured you might need some time." Jackie sat down across from her. "You don't have to go if you don't want to. I can tell him you're tied up." Sarah thought about it. Part of her wanted to avoid the conversation entirely, to let the whole uncomfortable situation fade away. But another part, the part that had once been a Marine, knew that wasn't the right thing to do. "No," she said, standing up, "I'll go." Commander Patterson was sitting up in his hospital bed, the lights dimmed but not off. He looked older in the soft glow, and Sarah could see the weight of whatever he was feeling in the lines of his face. When she entered, he straightened slightly, a gesture of respect that he probably wasn't even aware of making. "Nurse Mitchell," he said, "thank you for coming." Sarah stood at the foot of his bed, waiting. "I owe you an apology," Patterson continued, the words clearly difficult for him. "Multiple apologies, actually. What I said earlier, how I treated you. There's no excuse for it." "No, there isn't," Sarah said quietly. He flinched slightly at her bluntness. "I'm a dinosaur, that's what my daughter tells me anyway, set in my ways, unwilling to adapt, too stubborn for my own good." He looked down at his hands. "But that's not an excuse either. I was disrespectful and discriminatory, and I'm ashamed of myself." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down. "Can I ask you something, Commander?" "Of course." "Why? What made you so certain I wasn't capable before you even gave me a chance?" Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I don't know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense. I come from a different time, a different military. When I joined, there were no women in combat roles. Everything was segregated, separate. And I told myself that was just how things were, how they should be." He met her eyes. "But watching you today, not just after I saw your tattoo, but before, the way you handled yourself with dignity when I was being cruel, I realized something. My problem isn't with women in the military or women in medicine. My problem is with change, and with the fact that the world I understood doesn't exist anymore." "The world you understood wasn't fair," Sarah said. "It wasn't right." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't. And I think some part of me has always known that, but it's hard to admit that the things you believed, the principles you thought you stood for, were based on something flawed." He paused. "Will you tell me about Helmand?" Sarah hadn't talked about Helmand in years, not in any real way. She'd done her therapy with the VA, processed what she needed to process, but sharing those experiences with others always felt fraught. People wanted stories of heroism or horror, nothing in between. But looking at Patterson now, she sensed he was asking for something different, not entertainment or validation, but understanding. "It was hard," she began. "We lost 3 people from my unit while I was there, 2 to IEDs, 1 to a sniper. Every patrol felt like it could be your last. Every pile of trash on the side of the road, every window in every building, every person you passed could be a threat." She wrapped her arms around herself. "But it was also where I learned what I was capable of. I was a field medic, ZIR 311 trained, but primarily medical support. I saved lives out there. I also took lives to protect my Marines." Patterson nodded slowly. "Were you accepted by the men in your unit?" Sarah smiled slightly. "Eventually. I had to prove myself twice as hard, twice as long. There were a couple who never fully accepted me, who always saw me as a liability, but most of them came around. When bullets are flying, you don't care who's pulling you to safety as long as someone is." "I saw combat too," Patterson said. "Iraq, the first Gulf War, and then Afghanistan in the early days. I thought I understood what service meant, what sacrifice looked like. But I'm realizing I had a very narrow view of it." "Why did you refuse help from me specifically?" Sarah asked. "Was it just because I'm a woman, or was there something else?" Patterson hesitated. "I had a daughter," he said quietly. "Had, past tense. She died 4 years ago. Car accident, drunk driver." His voice thickened. "She was a lawyer, brilliant, tough as nails. She always challenged me on my views about women, about gender roles. We fought about it a lot, especially after she found out I'd opposed women in combat positions. "I'm sorry for your loss," Sarah said and meant it. The last real conversation we had, we argued. She told me I was a hypocrite, that I claimed to stand for honor and respect but didn't show it to half the population. I said things I regret about how she didn't understand military culture, how some traditions needed to be preserved. He wiped at his eyes roughly. She left angry. A week later she was gone. I never got to tell her. I never got to say I was sorry. Sarah felt her own throat tighten. "Commander, when I saw you today, something about you reminded me of her. The way you carried yourself, confident and calm. And instead of seeing that as a good thing, instead of honoring her memory by respecting you, I lashed out. Because you represented everything she tried to make me understand, everything I was too stubborn to accept." He looked at her directly. "I'm sorry. Not just for today, but for every time I've made someone feel the way I made you feel. For every opportunity I might have blocked. Every young woman or man I might have discouraged because they didn't fit my narrow idea of what a Marine should be." Sarah sat with his words, feeling the weight of them. Apologies like this were rare, real apologies from the heart that showed genuine understanding of the harm caused. "I forgive you," she said finally. "But Commander, you need to understand something. I don't represent all women who have served any more than you represent all male Marines. We're individuals. Some of us are tough as nails, some struggle, some excel, some fail, just like male service members. What matters is being judged on our own merits, our own actions." "You're right," Patterson said. "You're absolutely right." They talked for another hour. Patterson asked about her transition from military to civilian life, about why she'd chosen nursing. Sarah explained how the skills had overlapped, how she discovered that caring for people in their most vulnerable moments, whether on a battlefield or in an ER, was where she was meant to be. In turn, Patterson told her about his 3 decades of service, about the young Marines he'd mentored, about the mistakes he'd made and the lessons he'd learned. He talked about his wife, who'd stood by him through multiple deployments, and about his 2 sons, both of whom had followed him into the military. "My youngest, James, he's more like his sister was," Patterson said. "Open-minded, progressive. He's been trying to get me too. Evolve, I guess you'd say. He'd like you." As the night wore into early morning, Sarah found herself seeing not just a stubborn old Marine, but a complex man trying, perhaps too late, to grow beyond his limitations. When her shift ended at 6 a.m., she stopped by his room one more time. Patterson was awake, looking tired but more peaceful than he had the night before. "Your ceremony is tonight, right?" Sarah asked. He nodded. "If the doctors clear me, though I'm not sure I deserve to be honored after yesterday." "Yesterday you made a mistake. Today you're trying to do better. That's what honor looks like, Commander, not being perfect, but being willing to change." She paused. "For what it's worth, 35 years of service is something to be proud of." "Thank you, Sergeant Mitchell." The use of her rank, spoken with respect rather than mockery, brought tears to her eyes. "It's just Sarah now. I left that life behind." "Did you?" Patterson asked gently. "Or did you just take those values into a new mission?" Sarah didn't have an answer for that. She went home, slept fitfully for a few hours, and woke to her phone ringing. It was Dr. Chen. "I wanted to let you know Commander Patterson is being discharged this afternoon. Cardiology cleared him for the ceremony tonight with restrictions. No stress, medication compliance, follow-up next week." He paused. "He also asked if you'd be willing to attend the ceremony as his guest." Sarah's first instinct was to say no. She'd said what needed to be said, made her peace with the situation. Going to the ceremony felt like too much, like forcing something that should remain private. But then she thought about second chances, about the difficulty of change, about her own daughter who she hoped would grow up in a world where old prejudices had less power. "Tell him yes," she said. The Veterans Memorial Ceremony was held in Cedar Springs Town Square, a modest park with a new granite monument listing the names of local service members who died in the line of duty. About 200 people gathered in the cold February evening, their breath forming clouds in the lamplight. Sarah stood near the back, wearing her dress uniform. She hadn't put it on in 3 years, but it still fit, though it felt strange after so long in scrubs and civilian clothes. She debated wearing it, worried it might seem like she was making a point, but ultimately decided that honoring Patterson's service meant honoring her own. Commander Patterson sat on the small stage with other veterans being honored that night. When he saw Sarah in the crowd, his eyes widened, and he placed his hand over his heart in acknowledgement. The ceremony proceeded with speeches from the mayor, a local congressman, and the commander of the nearest Marine base. When it came time to honor Patterson, the base commander read a list of his commendations and deployments that was genuinely impressive. Patterson had served with distinction, led men in combat, made sacrifices for his country. When Patterson himself stood to speak, Sarah noticed his hands shaking slightly. He gripped the podium and looked out at the crowd. "Thank you all for this honor," he began. 35 years ago, I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I've tried to live up to that oath every day of my life." He paused. "But recently, I was reminded that defending the Constitution means defending all Americans, not just the ones who look like me, think like me, or come from the same generation as me." Sarah felt the crowd's attention sharpen. "Yesterday, I made a serious error in judgment. I allowed prejudice and stubbornness to cloud my thinking, and I disrespected someone who deserved my utmost respect, a fellow Marine, a combat veteran, and a dedicated medical professional." Patterson's voice grew stronger. "We talk a lot about honor in the military, about integrity and values, but those words are meaningless if we don't live them, if we don't extend them to everyone." He looked directly at Sarah. "Sergeant Sarah Mitchell is here tonight. She served 3 tours, including in Helmand Province, one of the toughest areas of Afghanistan. She saved lives in combat and continues to save lives as an ER nurse. Yesterday, I refused her help based on ignorance and bias. Today, I want to publicly thank her for her service to our country and for the grace she showed me when I didn't deserve it." The crowd turned to look at Sarah, and she felt her face flush. Several veterans in the crowd began to clap, and the applause spread until the whole gathering was standing, honoring her service. Patterson gestured for her to come forward. Sarah hesitated, then made her way through the crowd to the stage. When she reached Patterson, he held out his hand, and when she took it, he pulled her into a brief embrace. "Semper Fi, Sergeant," he said quietly. "Semper Fi, Commander," she replied. After the ceremony, dozens of people came up to thank Sarah for her service, to shake her hand, to share their own stories of military life. Several older veterans apologized for not knowing women had served in combat roles, for not understanding the breadth of military service in modern times. Corporal Diaz found her in the crowd. "That was pretty incredible, ma'am," he said. "What you did for the commander, giving him a second chance." "We all deserve second chances, Corporal," Sarah said. "The question is what we do with them." As the crowd dispersed, Patterson approached her one final time. "I meant what I said up there, about grace. You didn't have to forgive me, and you certainly didn't have to come tonight." "No, I didn't," Sarah agreed. "But I wanted to, because holding on to anger, holding on to hurt, that's not what I learned in the Corps. I learned to adapt and overcome, to complete the mission, to leave no one behind." She smiled. "Even stubborn Marine commanders who don't know what's good for them." Patterson laughed, a real laugh that transformed his face. "I'm supposed to follow up with cardiology next week. Will you be working?" "I will." "Good. Maybe I'll schedule it for when you're on shift. Let you take my vitals just to prove I've learned my lesson." "I'd like that." They stood together in the cold evening air, 2 Marines from different eras, different backgrounds, different experiences, united by service and by the hard work of understanding each other. "You know," Patterson said, "my daughter would have liked you. I wish she could have met you." "I wish I could have met her," Sarah said. "She sounds like she was an amazing person." "She was, and she'd be proud of me tonight, I think, for finally listening to what she tried to teach me." He looked at the memorial, at the names carved into the granite. "It's never too late to do better, is it?" "No, Commander," Sarah said. "It's never too late." As she drove home that night, still in her dress uniform, Sarah thought about all the times she'd been dismissed, underestimated, turned away. She thought about the long road to acceptance, the constant need to prove herself, the weight of representing all women in uniform whenever she wore it. But she also thought about moments like tonight, when understanding broke through, when people changed, when old wounds began to heal. The world wasn't perfect, wasn't fair, wasn't where it needed to be. But it was better than it had been, and people like Commander Patterson, stubborn, flawed, but ultimately willing to grow, gave her hope that it would continue to improve. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. "Heard about the ceremony. Proud of you." Another text came from Jackie. "You're a badass and everyone should know it." And finally, one from a number she didn't recognize. "This is James Patterson, the commander's son. He called me tonight, told me what happened. Thank you for giving my dad a chance to be better. He's been different since my sister died. This is the first time I've heard real hope in his voice in years." Sarah pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, letting the emotions of the past 36 hours wash over her. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also somehow lighter than she'd been in a long time. She'd worn the uniform. She'd served her country. She'd come home and continued to serve in a different way. And tonight, she'd helped one stubborn Marine commander understand that service, sacrifice, and honor weren't limited by gender, by generation, or by narrow definitions of who deserved respect. Tomorrow she'd go back to the ER, back to saving lives in scrubs instead of camouflage. But tonight, she was Sergeant Sarah Mitchell, United States Marine Corps, and she was proud of every scar, every lesson, every hard-won moment of understanding that had brought her to this point. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, to the mission, to the core, to the values that mattered most. And to the endless, difficult, worthwhile work of making the world a little more just, one stubborn heart at a time.